recording has been turned on. Welcome everyone to CP Square's visit with Etienne, Beverly, and Marc Coenders today, talking about a particular case in our series on landscapes of practice and systems convening. So the format today will be that we expect to have, we have allowed 90 minutes for our conversation. This is going to be a fishbowl kind of format where people can jump in and turn their video on and interact directly, turn their audio on, of course. And as yesterday, we have an open chat, which we'll gather and post after the session. And the idea is throughout these sessions to mix talking about theory and kind of a meta view of the subject, as well as practice, the actual working of a specific case. We want to start with a few reflections on our experience and conversation yesterday. So one way we could do that is to post things in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute, everyone is by default muted, and make an oral audio contribution, your thoughts on how our conversation was yesterday. We have two people who have were not here yesterday, and but most of us who are here today were here yesterday. So anybody want to jump in? Either on the chat. So Bev, maybe while people type, you could say something about what was helpful about yesterday.
Well, people asking questions, and asking questions that maybe we haven't heard before, because all the questions that are asked make you start thinking about it in different ways. So, and it was so much better from our side to be talking to questions rather than just like talking to what we thought was important. But that's why it would be interesting to get some feedback, because maybe some people would have preferred something a bit more structured, which took through a sort of series of steps.
Well, then you can have more if you want.
So Barb McDonald says that she appreciated hearing Bev and Etienne talk about the things they've done that drove them to their theory. So having a kind of historical context, developmental view was good.
Mm-hmm.
Linda Blanc says the conversational format. Yeah. So anybody else want to jump in?
Hi, it's Becky. Hold on, hope you can hear me. I thought it was interesting the move from local communities of practice into a whole landscape of practice, and everyone's perspectives and questions on that, I think, rose some very interesting perspectives which have certainly challenged my thinking. So that's an idea that I'm actually exploring through the social learning certificate, and yesterday's discussion just raised lots of interesting questions that drove that discussion down deeper. So I think it's a really great area which we could explore further on CP Squared and in these next two sessions.
Great. So we've had comments both about the format and and about the content. Anything more on either one? So I see multiple people typing. And more people are showing up, so that's good. So allowing space for input and comments is always a bit of an effort in this context. So Etienne or Bev, were there any points that people made that we need to be sure and bring forward to today's conversation?
Well, certainly the nature of the work of systems convener, the traits that they bring to that work, that would be important, because that's, in a way, the articles on Habiforum is very much the portrait of a systems convener. And so to explore more the kind of people who do that, the kind of characteristics that allow them to do it well, and the kind of challenge that they face. And those are still things that we need to understand better.
Yes, and we talk about systems convener in a slightly abstract way, or a sort of archetypal way, whereas really to hone in, like in Marc's example, of somebody who is a systems convener, and the kind of challenges he makes and the kind of problems and things he felt like he did wrong, it's great to have an insight into that.
So one thing that came up for me now that we're talking about that, getting down to the details of practice, was a remark around the case that Bev talked about in the last half hour, where it sounded as if that particular group met once in a very impactful way and did not regularly interact in the future after that. And it struck me that that was very interesting in terms of, making a practice out of this systems convening work, and raised issues about how do you evaluate or reflect on what you've done and how well you've done it, if indeed that's a relevant question.
Was that to me, John? Yeah, I didn't quite get it, because that group that I was talking about does meet on a very regular basis. So.
The whole group then did agree to meet regularly, somehow.
No, each group separately.
So the media, if we're talking about the group of the media and the members of parliament, they meet separately. That was a one-off time that they came together. Yeah.
Okay.
Although we have to say that the story is not quite finished, because it was followed later by a meeting between the clerk and members of the media, but in a different context. So the idea that those two should connect, I think, was continued later, but in a different context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I think that's very, that's very good to know about when it is that the story is still incomplete and going forward and evolving. And maybe this is the time when we turn the session over to Marc Coenders today, a longtime friend, kind of major contributor to CP Square in its early days and ongoingly. And during this conversation, I think we'll be watching for comments in the chat and invite people to jump in and turn their video on and interact directly if they're interested. So I'm going to turn my microphone off and my video as well and turn it over to Marc Coenders.
Thank you, John. I hope that you can hear me well. I'm not sure because Etienne is difficult to understand for me. Badly is better, but anyway, today there was another guest invited, actually the system convener, which plays a role in the chapter in the book. It's up from Lyon. Because of serious illness, he cannot be here with us. So I worked with Up, I think, over 10 years in the Habiforum program. So I can tell a little bit about his development, I think, as a system convener, because I think he is a system convener, as there were other people within the Habiforum network that acted as a system convener. And I think when I was in the session last night, I thought the whole case, Habiforum case, is actually a kind of development towards the understanding of what it is to set up a learning program in a field, in a landscape of practice. And in this case, it is about spatial planning, both urban, infrastructural, and city planning as a practice, how it is in Holland, and how Habiforum was one of the initiatives to bring a certain change in that practice, in that landscape of practice. And I put in on the CP Square website a few pages as a kind of background. I don't know if people had a chance to read, but I also prepared some slides, but it is not, I think, the idea to go to a PowerPoint presentation. So I just want to show some pictures and some backgrounds of the Habiforum case, and then I hope that Jen and Beth will jump in and go back to the theory, and then we go back to the case again. And hopefully the case will help us to explore the theory a little bit more tonight. So I started, I think it's rather funny, when last weekend I was thinking about these sessions we had this week, and when I saw this picture last night with there were no hills, there were mountains, really mountains in the landscape, I think. But then you go to Holland, and I don't know if everybody has been to the Netherlands, but it's really flat. And I took this picture in the Eastern Walk. I walked on dikes, on grass dikes, and this is a very old polder. Polder, is that a good English word? Polder? Land that is drained. Drained land. Yeah. Now this is quite an old one. This is like the beginning of the 17th century, and yeah, I think as a metaphor, in Holland, just as a background, spatial planning is really something. There's a very precise, regulated, procedural practice because of the issues of water and the shortage in general on land. I will go to a next slide to, oh yeah, I thought that was my reflection actually when I was thinking about last session. This is actually interesting because I didn't translate it, but it says something like, it's a Chinese saying, that if there are no ways between villages and a few hundred people go on their way from the one village to the other, then a way come into existence. So I thought this convener, just my reflection, and it Jen and Beverly can help me maybe, in finding new ways in a landscape, and also about showing other people a possible way. So that's how I interpreted last night's session for myself. These are just a few quotes, or not like quotes, but some sentences out of the book chapter. And I go to the spatial planning in Holland as a practice. So for you to understand, this is not a country like Canada or the United States where there is a kind of, there is space like free space. In Holland, spatial planning is very procedural. It's always about compromises, and these are often felt as suboptimal, that you cannot do how you would like to do it, to act it. The aesthetics, and that's a thing when in the beginning of Habiforum, there were some questions from artists, but also planners and policymakers about the aesthetics of the landscape. It's very highly valued in Holland, the landscape, but after the 70s, somehow there was, it was less aesthetic. It was felt less aesthetics. And processes of negotiation became slower and slower, and also more fragmented. If you have been in Amsterdam, even the newly built parts of the city were like planned as a whole, and it's really like a tradition on that also. So that's when Habiforum started. There was there were a lot of things to be proud of. The way water is the way the country is dealing with water, the way there were some grand designs, so to say, in planning, but also there were some problems felt broadly in society. And then Habiforum was initiated as a public-private program that actually ran over 10 years to bring forth some change in the planning. When I'm talking, we can't hear you. You don't hear me? You don't hear me anymore? Oh, you hear me? Ah, okay. But John is saying we can't hear you. Right. Okay, he hears me now. So as an innovation program, it started to support all kinds of projects, and actually it focused on transformation from what would be the actual practice as a top-down spatial planning to a more collective process of area development, and from authorization to co-creation. So authorization, we mean that everything has to be authorized by some level of government. And the collective area development is also a way of planning where policymakers and citizens, entrepreneurs, and so on are much more working together in a co-creation process.
Mark, did you see the question from Lucy, who said, is there a lot of corruption? Is spatial planning transparent?
Where is that question? Sorry, from?
Is spatial planning transparent? Yeah.
Okay, is there a lot of corruption? I think as in most European countries, the construction firms, they had a kind of way of getting money and constructing and even constructing more, and that one could say is a kind of corruption, because these buildings, both houses and business buildings, were not meet a real need. I think in Holland it's still not, that gap is not so big, but if you go to Spain, for example, there were constructed suburbs and business areas where never, they are, even up until now, they are not occupied. So if you mean that kind of corruption, but not corruption in the sense, no, I don't think so. No, I cannot answer it more precisely, I think. I hope that gives you an answer, Lotte.
When you say it is fragmented, it might be useful to give you a sense of the range of practices involved.
Yeah, by fragmented is, I mean also part of the regulation and the over-regulation of the practice is that everything is specified, and the functional usage of space was extremely separated. So a bakery in a housing area at a certain moment could not fit together. So part of Habiforum was again to mix the functions of space usage. For example, I don't know if you, so the fragmentation was also a functional fragmentation of space usage. And if you mean more the discipline, the fragmented disciplines, yeah, there is a lot of fragmentation, but the basic fragmentation is what we call specialists on the wet side and on the dry side. And if you understand the Netherlands, that dry, so land and water, is always together. But these are the two fields that were completely separated in the last century, after the war, I think. So that and that starts, I think, the fragmentation, but all disciplines also in policy making. You had people concerning infrastructure, people concerning certain urban areas, certain junctions, certain the kind of wholeness in planning and in designing was somehow disappeared somehow. Yeah. I hope that gives you an answer.
But you're talking about regulation. You are talking about designers, architects, actual users of the space. So that's the kind of range we are talking about.
Like in the Habiforum program, there was an effort to bring together these disciplines you name, just like architects, constructors, policy makers, and even also from the user side, cooperation of housing, entrepreneurs, and so on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think it's good to know for the audience that Etienne, you were there. You were invited a few times during this Habiforum program to join us and to reflect upon the way we were dealing with the goal of the program. So I can tell a little bit, I think, and it is in line, I think, with what we heard yesterday, that what we did in the beginning, it was very much a knowledge program, in the sense that we tried to organize all kinds of learning sessions. There was still a lot of top-down thinking, because like famous architects were invited, or R&D directors of construction firms were invited to structure a theme. It was quite top-down still, and the domain were defined top-down, and professionals were, I would not say invited, but they were really pressed to come to these all kinds of conferences. So that did work for some people, but it didn't work for a lot of people. So I think there you came in, that we adopted, and I think that was very much the work also of Ab van Lijn, who at that time worked as a senior, I don't know exactly his role, but at a senior level in the government department on knowledge management. That he thought that a community-based approach would be more appropriate. So it was more about spotting areas of interest, finding. We didn't call them conveners. We called them owners of a certain interesting or upcoming topic. It was more about formulating questions rather than transfer knowledge, and more about gathering people and going on learning expeditions to all kinds of interesting new ways of dealing with spatial planning. And it was about developing projects together.
So could you describe the learning expedition you did? It would be good to see very concretely what a learning expedition looks like in your case.
How it looked like?
Yes, a learning expedition.
Yes. For example, I was involved in what is called a community of practice on creative industry, creative economy, and it brought together quite different people, but these people were all concerned with finding a new functional usage for old buildings, like old industrial buildings mostly, or industrial terrains, in fact. And what we actually did, and I'm more in the role of a facilitator. I did this project with the former deputy of the city of Amsterdam, Jeroen Cyrus. He couldn't be here tonight, but he had the authority to bring these people together from different cities. And we went from industrial site to industrial site and look how people, sometimes local entrepreneurs, but sometimes policymakers, sometimes people from a concept developer, firm, we're dealing with these industrial terrains and give them new functions. Like it could be a theater, but could also be housing for independent consultants, or it could be a laboratory or something. But we really went to these sites and had sessions concerning with a difficult issue on that site. So it was really helping together each other in developing these, reinventing the usage of these industrial buildings or terrains.
And so how would you interact with a site that you visited? Would you give them advice? Would you just walk around? I mean, I'm interested in a very concrete,
yes, for example,
concrete.
For example, in Rotterdam, I remember we gave all the participants, maybe not all, but a lot of cameras. And this was a site in Rotterdam where an old terrain was turned into more a shopping site. And we asked participants, and there were further developments going on, to go into the neighborhood of the area and to interview people that live there and maybe make usage of the newly upcoming shopping centers, and bring that data into the session. And so we tried to make these conversations very concrete, always. Some things we brought together because there were all kinds of conflicts of interest. So we really tried to bring people, the conflict, into the session and try to help a local group to overcome that conflict also. So not just talking about negotiation, but trying to make breakthroughs in a difficult negotiation process. Yeah. So we started as a knowledge, with a knowledge approach. As I say we, because I was involved in the beginning as a facilitator and researcher, but we is a kind of small bureau that actually was the center of Habiforum. Then it switched to a more community-based approach, and I think the third, or maybe towards the end, it was still a community-based approach, but it got more focused towards the new practice. And I tried to, I will skip this, to put it in some visuals. We tried in the end, Habiforum, to get communities across projects, and what we tried is to how do you say that? Really get a developmental process going on in the landscape of practice, maybe so to say, and to get from best practice to next practice, to get people more focused. And with focused, I mean that there was a shared understanding about these two, what I just mentioned, these two transformations from top-down spatial planning to collective area development, and in a more co-creative way. So this was, we tried this notion from best practice to next practice to make it more, to give it more structure, but still it still worked from a community-based approach. Because otherwise the projects would benefit from a community, but the practice as a next practice was not established. So we put research on it, participatory action research, more, and we try to go through to certain stages, which I labeled here as a kind of, that we try to really transfer the ambition into a development, into a transition, so that people felt that they really contributed also, not just to their own project, but also to the field as a whole, to the new practice. Maybe it's good to stop here now, because I don't have the time to read the questions, and maybe we should switch to some discussion or interaction, and maybe you have some reflections, Beverly or Jan, to start with, how this connects to the theory.
Well, actually, there's an interesting question there from Doris, who says,
Okay.
how do you move? Ab is the sort of central person in this. What made him move, or how did he get to move things from being top down to collective, to the more horizontal? What was his journey? How did he do it?
I try to find the question, or is it you just is it in the list, the question also?
Yeah, it's towards the top. Doris please come.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. Now, there were part of the Habiforum program. There was temporary regulations, both on with the national government, but also on the level of provinces and cities, that actually gave people a legal ground to not follow certain procedures and regulations. So there was a really a way to experiment with planning in a different way, and it was also legally backed up, so people feel secure to go into certain negotiations that were beforehand not allowed, because then you had certain stages that you have to pass, and now also certain parties could sit together and Habiforum facilitated these processes to really negotiate together. Normally, when a city, for example, is owner of a certain piece of ground, you have to act in a very formal way with certain parties, and due to the Habiforum program, there were constructions made legally that give parties the possibility to act together in a new way. For example, I don't know if people have seen the New York Times article on the Overdiepse polder, which is in the link is in the City Square site. There was also what was called an experiential legislation that made it possible for farmers to keep their farm in that piece of land, which was not possible according to the normal legislation.
And also, it should be said, Mark, that art has some funding also at its disposal to incentivize certain projects.
Could you repeat the question, Beverly, because I didn't understand it?
Ab it was not a question, he was just commenting that Ab had some funding to go ahead with these projects. So he had a budget.
He had a budget, yes. Quite a huge budget, I think. It was before the crisis. Habiforum Project, I think, still till 2008. It just ended with the financial crisis. I think, like in most European countries, but in the Netherlands, like in Norway and maybe also Austria and Germany, there were a lot of financial means to actually do this type of projects. In general, I think. But in the Netherlands, I know, sure. It's not that there are no initiatives in this, like this, of this type anymore, but there are less in the Netherlands, definitely.
But I think it should be said that that for us, having some money gave him legitimacy and a way to impose almost some pressure on the stakeholders to collaborate, saying, hey, if you don't collaborate, I'm not going to give you any money.
Yes. There was always, it was never fully financed. It was always a part of the funding in a project. And that I think is what the co-financing way of stimulating, it worked, I think, quite well. And an interesting thing is, I think now that Ab could tell more about it, because after the program ended, I think 30 or 40 parties went on with a different way of funding a kind of program, and they now have established a cooperation, which is with multiple ownership. So like they created an organization with multiple ownership, which I think is a European way of funding. But in Germany, for example, the Raiffeisen Bank, the Raiffeisen Bank, is a very old bank with a lot of owners. In the beginning, farmers, and later on small businesses. And now they created such whether it is small, but they created an organization with multiple ownership. So I think that's one of the developments coming out of these community-based programs also. It didn't stop. I see it myself, but what is very hot at the moment, for example, all kinds of initiatives on local energy production, that these people form communities, but they also give a kind of structure organizationally that they build in multiple ownership, so they're becoming more business-like, but have also community characteristics, a kind of democracy built in. Okay.
Dixon has a question that's interesting at the top of the chat about doing some work with the Utrecht government.
I'm trying to find it. Who asked this question?
Nancy Dixon?
I put it at the bottom.
Oh, Nancy. We never met, but I heard of you for example, to Russell Kerkhoven. You know, probably. I'm doing work. Okay, I found the question. Okay. I think one thing of the culture of Holland, culture for Holland, difficult, because Holland, in a certain way, is also in a crisis, in a political crisis, I would say. But anyway, I think there's a lot of engagement of people with their neighborhood, the area where they live, and also with the whole country, because you live close together, and some of this engagement is formalized already in medieval times. I wrote about that the water boards originated in the medieval times and are really democratic institutions where we have to elect people that play a very formal role in protecting the land by the dikes. They have to inspect. They are fully responsible, but we have to elect these people. So there is also a democratic structure. But if you go to a city, I think it's more about citizens now, and I think what I see in Amsterdam, I know the situation in Amsterdam a little bit better, is that the view is coming up that the potential in a neighborhood is so huge, and by policymakers is hardly used. In some areas of Amsterdam, for example, all kinds of specialists live there, and policymakers from their bureau, they have a kind of planning attitude towards that neighborhood. And I think that's turning now, that we don't say anymore that we have to get people involved, but how do you give space to the enormous creative potential that is actually living in cities? And I think in Utrecht, policymakers will I think in more or less the same, as some of them in the same way, and how to unleash that creative power. That I think is a concern of a modern policymaker, instead of putting regulations on citizens and users of a certain space. I hope that this gives you some answers to the culture of Holland.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to hear, well, tomorrow we will see an example that's done in the US. It's going to be interesting to see what is the relationship between sort of cultural systems and this kind of work. Bev yesterday was talking about Africa. So it's an open question whether systems convening is culture dependent or I don't want to say culture transcendent, but whether it can apply across cultures. I think that's a really interesting question, and we don't know the answer, but I think that's really interesting.
Mark, can you see Linda's question?
Linda? Can I ask again about the community engagement, that question?
Correct, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think in the beginning, these communities we brought together in the Habiforum program were professional communities from different disciplines, but on the learning expeditions, but even later on, there were also all kinds of other people becoming member of these communities, people living in an area so non-professionals, I would say, but non-professionals with a mission to bring forth some change in a city or in a neighborhood. And some of them, they were from quite different backgrounds, but we had also professors that retired and after retirement became very, very active. For example, on all kinds of sustainable issues or safety and so on. I found it quite interesting. And these people, they had a kind of authority, but were acting as a citizen, I would say. And sometimes you also see that as with certain entrepreneurs who became more concerned about a bigger issue than their own business. The way logistics were, and it could be better, and so on. And these farmers in the drain land of the Overdiepse polder, for example, they really wanted to stay in their land, the land where they had, that they were very often they were born there, and the family had a farm for many, many years. And now the government decided to make this land again the land that it could be used by the river to become a lake again, and they built these farms. They constructed the original farms on a very, we call them terpen. It's very small hills, like 10 meters above the normal ground level, which is an old way of constructing farms in the north of the Netherlands. And I think also in Denmark, that you know that land certain periods of the year is flooding, but for the farm it's okay because it gets dry at the end of the winter and you can farm most of the year. So they put an old way of doing in this new project. That's maybe also interesting because of this kind of program as Habiforum, where you try to do something in a landscape of practice that all kinds of forgotten knowledge is popping up as more valuable than we thought, because in these years where regulations and procedures and strict organization became the way of doing, or more small solutions maybe were somehow forgotten and were reinvented. Another Dutch polder case. Thank you. I will go to the other. Yeah, Bodegraaf. Yeah.
Mark, there's a...
Yeah, sorry. I was looking at the link of Romy for a second. Yeah.
Mark, there are a lot of people asking about how social media, how you use social media and how you blended face-to-face and online in this project.
Okay. As you know, the Netherlands is a small country, so face-to-face is a normal way of meeting each other. During the program of Habiforum, there were several forums and online platforms, but they never get very busy, I would say, because people were still using phone and say, where do we meet? Is it The Hague, Amsterdam, Utrecht? Normally, or Rotterdam, that is the way of doing things. You jump on a train or you step in your car and then it's always within 1 hour. So it was really about face-to-face, was normal, yeah. But now, there is another program on the biggest infrastructural projects in the Netherlands, and they do actually a lot of online, because they really try to get a very more regularly participation of very busy project leaders. And they are used to actually only communicate via mobile phone, so they have developed all kinds of apps to get these people connected and to get the knowledge exchange via social media. Yeah. So it's not, and internet is everywhere, and people have very good internet connections, so it's not about that. And you don't get the impression that social media are not used, because Twitter, for example, is really is like, if you have it's like normal as normal as conversations, normal conversations. People Twitter a lot and very direct and incorrect often, I think, also. Yeah, I think that's correct, Brenda, that this project was initiated before social media became a way of life. But it was initiated when we were at the top of what I would say knowledge management. And there was still the idea that you could gather knowledge in a repository and then distribute it. I think that was the world Up was living in. He was at a knowledge management firm in a big government department, and that was the idea. And he told me that he read an article of Peter Senge, and in that article Senge refers to the first publication of Etienne about community practice. And there he made the connection that there was a kind of different approach. So it started as a community approach, but it was still, it was coming out of this knowledge management way of thinking. I think the first people that were responsible for the funding, they thought that Habiforum would become a kind of knowledge repository on spatial planning. But it turned out to become very different. Became very different, yes. The invisible hills.
Yeah, I think it might be worth it, Mark, to talk about Art a little bit. You know, how he grew into becoming a systems convener, which he was not at the beginning, I think, right?
And the kind of challenges that he was facing as a systems convener.
Yeah.
At what point did he start working with you to kind of help him become a systems convener?
Yeah, I was looking at it if I had some preparation on that, but I think the switch to invite people with a bigger idea on how, or an idea on how a certain change in spatial planning would take place. And Habiforum became more a group of people that was the support structure for these type of people. And knowing that it is difficult to bring busy professionals and even from different fields together. I think that was the biggest challenge, and I think but I don't know how it came, but for me, at a certain moment, I learned to make a difference between the convening role and the facilitator role. So in the beginning, I always also took, I think, tasks that were actually more part of the convener role than the facilitator role. Because I have no authority in the spatial planning. But when I realized that, I never did the wrong things anymore, in the sense that I tried to bring people together. I asked other people who they would like to bring together, and the way I could help them bringing them together. And one thing I think most important for me is that I start looking for kind of solutions or answers to certain questions, but instead looking for people who somehow share the same questions. And I try to get conveners. I think intuitively conveners understand that that is the way, that's a very powerful way of bringing people together, that you bring people together that share a question or a real concern. Yeah, it's in the definition of community practice, of course. But often people try to find or bring people together where one has a certain question and the other has answers to bring to the table. But really crafting questions and that people come together with more or less the same question and also the same ambition, I thought I saw that very powerful, and also for me as a facilitator of learning processes, very helpful, because these people have a kind of self-starting process, and then you can bring in all kinds of methods that improve their reflection or improve their preparation or improve their after work and so on. It is always difficult in a session where people ask themselves, oh, is this the right session I'm in or not? And I think that's what conveners good in, that they really bring the people together, and they really take a lot of preparation time, because they know once you are together that it is really quality time. It's costly, and yeah. So this understanding that it is a different role, I think that summarizes the.
But was it something that you experienced, this difference, or is it something that Ab discovered as he was sort of moving into that role of almost being an orchestrator of conveners, if I understand what you're saying?
I don't know if I have. Is your question about if this as a role, is it more established now through the case? Is that your question again?
Well, I mean, if I understand correctly, you were talking about transitioning from thinking you were a convener facilitator, it was your role to bring people together, to you were an enabler of people's convening. The people who actually had the legitimacy to do the convening, and you became an enabler of that. And Ab became kind of a master convener or something like this, a convener of conveners or something. Is that a way to think about it?
Yes, that's interesting because up from Lyon, who is figuring in the chapter, in the beginning he didn't just fund a lot of projects and bring people together, but also we started with what we called a meta community of practice, with facilitators talking about community of practice. It was kind of artificial, and I think he really made a switch when he understood that it should begin with a more authentic will or ambition of people, and so he was really traveling in the country to find these people, which were often already busy with a project or with a kind of initiative. So it was really more looking for and finding people that were already, I think, acting as, we didn't call them system convening, but were acting altruistically, more from a systems perspective or holistic perspective. Maybe we called it then. Yeah. Here we are.
I think that's a really interesting observation. You know, I'm not sure everybody's appreciating how amazing it is to suddenly realize that as a convener, you need to find the people who have legitimacy to actually do mini convening within the landscape and to orchestrate that process. It's amazing, you know. So I can imagine kind of Ab traveling through the Netherlands with the landscape in mind, you know, and seeing who are the people who are the potential connector here, who are the people who have a question or a project or something legitimate, something authentic that is going to kind of catalyze a new way of learning together. I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And also, I think that you think a program of a few years is already a long program. Because Habiforum took more or less 10 years, and I think even 10 years is not that a long period of time if you want to bring a change in a practice. I think practice is maybe more stable as we suppose, much more stable, and I'm not sure, but I think it's not easy to change.
Yeah.
Because people really, as I look at practices as it's bring forth by people again and again. So a few people that start another practice doesn't mean that we change the landscape of practice. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for example, if you look at education, it's more or less stable over many, many centuries already.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's another discussion line for tomorrow.
Yeah, because tomorrow we're also going to hear the project that is like going on for 15 years. So you say 10 years is actually probably short, and so it gives also a sense of the magnitude of these processes, you know, and the the kind of time frame that one has to think about when one engages in that work. So would you say that the project was really aborted too early from you? After 10 years, that was really too early to finish it?
No, at that time, I think it was losing energy also. So that yes, you have to transform the project also, or the program as it is called, Habiforum. For example, in 10 years, it performed very poorly on the exchange between the academic research on spatial planning and the project in the practice program. Actually, Habiforum consisted of two separated, more or less separated programs, a scientific program and a practice program. And in the practice program, sometimes researchers played a role, but in the beginning it was a kind of, it was in the project plan at the beginning, there was really a huge chapter on how Habiforum would bridge the worlds of theory and the worlds of practice and so on. And that was very difficult to establish, these two worlds. So maybe you could comment on that. It from the theory now as systems convening, because I think there was the program not very successful. And the practice in academics or at universities in Holland, but I don't know how it is in other countries, but the scientific program, once the money was allocated, they just hired a lot of PhD students. They did a kind of research for 4 or 5 years, and there were only a few that had a natural interest in what was going on in the practice program. A very few. So there were separated discourses and worlds, yeah. So maybe that's an interesting topic from the theory, how your theory could contribute to build this type of bridge. Maybe it's not about a bridge, maybe it's something else. I don't know, a dike or something.
And certainly, it would take, the theory would already predict to some extent that it would take, it would take at least a person to be a convener with legitimacy on both sides. And I think there was a conflict between art and the academic. I think that conflict between those two people who were acting as co-conveners in the beginning, I think made it almost impossible to cross, right?
Yeah. Sorry, Ken, it's still for me difficult to understand you completely, but just to elaborate a little bit on this connection between the two. I think what I experience is that academic researchers have a difficulty to participate in a very informal setting sometimes. That's what I experience. They seem to me have that they have to play their role of researcher with and then automatically bring in knowledge. So they constantly bring in a kind of abstract knowledge, which is not always helpful in a conversation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe I missed questions, or we should go to the theory now of a little bit more to come to a closure of the session. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a question from IDA about the methods that you were using for reflection, to improve reflection among the practitioners.
Mm-hmm. Which type of methods you mean?
Oh, did you have specific methods to improve the ability of a group to reflect on the existing practice, for instance?
Yeah, I think all types of I think common practice methods like systems thinking, but also fishbowl, kind of certain brainstorms. But I think in the Habiforum program there was a practice, I would say, that was a very public dialogue, where we try to provide all kinds of people that could interact with the community of practice that was had conversations on a certain topic. So this notion of going into the public, I think, was really helpful in getting another type of reflection.
Marc,
I think dialogue. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, we were revisiting that question a little bit after you were talking about that, so I didn't know if we got you off track, but that's very helpful about the fish bowls, and really I think the critical aspect of this, making that space for dialogue. I really got the feeling from reading the article and the PDF that you put on the CP Square that the government officials came really as learners with the public, and you created the culture that was inviting them to become part of the problem solving, and so that was very encouraging for me. So just thinking about those methods was very good, but I don't want to hold you up from getting into the theory. I think that would be another real bonus for everybody. So we can move there, and we can revisit about the methods, but thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, John, I see fishbowl. Yeah, but the notion of openness and find the public or go in public and have as much the conversation in the open, and also with users of in this program, with users of space.
Marc, one thing that you have not really talked about yet, which is, I think, very important in your project and in your article, is how you were dealing with issues of power and the power differentials between the different players. Because I think that's often something that's difficult for system conveners.
Yeah. I think Habiforum, I think, contributed as an innovation program to some insights and on the importance and the influence of power. It became a topic through Habiforum and the difficulties around power. They also developed what they called a power-free room or power-free space, where power issues would be set aside for a moment, and to get a conversation on the issues as much as possible. So it tried to contribute to get people with different stakes and power relations together. It really did an effort on that, and that also generated some insights on power. Although I'm not so much, I didn't deal with that topic of power. But a systems convener, like Jeroen Saris, you met him also, Jen, because of his former role as a deputy in the city of Amsterdam, he could really deal with people with different power relations and bring them together. And what I saw when he was preparing certain sessions, he would phone people and would tell them to be aware of a kind of difficult thing with the other party or that. So he didn't manipulate, but he did some important preparation to bring people with a certain ease at the table. I think that I would say that some system conveners would be good at. They do not manipulate. They do not think politically, although they are very much aware of the political issues, the power issues. But they do just enough to get people a little bit less, with less tensions at the table. Yes. And stay neutral. But not neutral in a passive way, but a very active way of being neutral, I think.
Mm-hmm. And was that the way that you create these power-free zones by preparing people and talking about power with them almost like in the back channel?
In the back channel, yes, also. So I remember, for example, in a session that we had this guy from Rotterdam who was always, he is powerful in the Rotterdam area as director of a big housing corporation, something. That he was also acting very politically in sessions. And then you see that a convener can keep this person within the community, but give him such an instruction that he acts a little bit less offensive or a little bit less political, and which is very helpful in the end in the conversation.
But that was done in the back channel, or that was done with the community present?
I think it starts in the back channel.
Uh-huh.
But it's going on during the session or in between in the coffee breaks and so on. It's a lot of work, I think, done in these clear moments. Yeah.
Mm. Were there moments where relationships of power were actually discussed openly in the group?
I didn't understand. Yeah. Sorry, Jen, I didn't get the question.
Were there moments when power was talked about openly with the group?
Yeah. That I remember now, like the the case that is mentioned in the New York Times article. There, I facilitated on different levels. We had a professional level, we had a management level conversations. They were also brought together, but we have also separated, and their power relations was very much the issue. And then we had the level of the minister, who we brought together with the deputies of the province, where this project was, to talk about the political implications and the conditions of doing such a project. But at the management, the conversation with project managers, the issue of power was reflected upon. Yeah, we had separate reflection sessions. Up and I facilitated these, and I remember that these were very productive for them, and they made it explicit for their regular working together. They had to work together from day to day, and these reflection sessions really helped to become better in working together in a new way, which they tried in that project.
So did you and Al introduce the topic, or did they kind of naturally took it on?
No, the topic I think was raised, but was more articulated by Ab, because he saw the implications. But it's always very helpful when you have participants who go towards the system's view on the project also. So there was, I remember there was a participant who was very helpful for Ab to get this issue really on the table. Because it depends upon willingness also, of course, from people to have such an open conversation.
So it seems to me that we are very close to the end of our time, and I don't know that it's possible to summarize, everything that we've talked about, but I think that maybe this is the time to wrap it up and plan on taking some questions over to the online space. Marc, as I recall, you're not going to be able to join us tomorrow. So
I'm on a plane tomorrow night.
So I want to thank you, as well as thanking Bev and Etienne for this really very illuminating conversation.